Krishna 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare Krishna 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 Pahima Krishna 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 Pahima Krishna 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 Rakshama Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Paramahamsa Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Shri Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Gaur Premanand. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to lotus feet of Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nastaprayeshu Abhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Vaibhati Naistiki. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart is practically destroyed to practically nil. And thus loving service unto the glorious Lord, who is praised with transcendental hymns, becomes established is an irrevocable fact. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed. Practically nil. And thus loving service unto the glorious Lord, who is praised with transcendental hymns, becomes established as an irrevocable fact. I don't know how I mixed that up, but it was all mixed up. Anyhow.
The thing is that when you're on stage, you never admit you made a mistake. Just keep moving because nobody will know.
Okay, so Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 18, text number 29. Please repeat. Abhuta Purva Sahasa Abhuta Purva Sahasa Shrut Shribyam Aditatmanaha Shrutribyam Aditatmanaha Brahmanam Prati Abhut Brahman Brahmanam Pratyabhut Brahman Matsaro Manyor Evacha Matsaro Manyor Evacha Abhita Purva Sahasa Shrutribyam Aditatmanaha Brahmanam Pratyabhut Brahman Matsara Manyo Evacha Abhuta Purva Sahasa Shrutrivyam Aditatmanaha Brahmanam Pratyabhut Brahman Matsara Manya Evacha Abhuta Purva Sahasa Shrutrivyam Aditatmanaha Brahmanam Pratyabhut Brahman Matsara Manya Evacha
Abhuta Purva Sahasa Shrutrivyam Aditatmanaha Brahmanam Pratyabhut Brahman Matsaro Manyorevacha
Abhuta Purva Sahasa
Brahmanam Pratyabhut Brahman
Matsara Manyorevacha
Abhuta Purva Sahasa Shrutrivyam Aditatmanaha Brahmanam Pratyabhut Brahman Matsaro Manya Evacha
Abhuta Purva Sahasa
Shrutrivyam Aditatmanaha Brahmanam Pratyabhut Brahman Matsaro Manya Evacha
Abhuta Purva Sahasa Shrutrivyam Aditatmanaha Brahmanam Pratyabhut Brahman Matsaro Manya Evacha
Abhuta Purva Sahasa
Shrutrivyam Aditatmanaha
Brahmanam Pratyabhut Brahman Matsaro Manyorevacha
Anyone else? Okay, word to word. Abhuta Purvaha Unprecedented. Sahasa Circumstantially. Shrut Hunger. Trivyam as well as by thirst. Audita being distressed. Atmanaha of his self. Brahmanam unto a brahmana. Prati against. Abhut became. Brahmana. Brahman. O Brahmanes. Matsaraha. Envious. Manyu. Angry. Eva. Thus. Cha. In. O Brahmanes, the king's anger and envy directed toward the Brahmana sage were unprecedented, being that circumstances had made him hungry and thirsty. Please repeat. O Brahmanes, the king's anger and envy directed toward the Brahmana sage
directed towards the Brahmana sage
were unprecedented, being that circumstances had made him hungry and thirsty. Srila Prabhupada's divine purport.
Jai Srila Prabhupada.
For a king like Maharaj Parikshit to become angry and envious, especially at a sage and Brahmana, was undoubtedly unprecedented. The king knew well that Brahmanas, sages, children, women, and old men are always beyond the jurisdiction of punishment. Similarly, the king, even though he commits a great mistake, is never to be considered a wrongdoer. But in this case, Maharaj Parikshit became angry and envious at the sage due to his hunger and thirst by the will of the Lord. The king was right to punish his subject for coldly receiving him or neglecting him. But because the culprit was a sage and a Brahmana, it was unprecedented. As the Lord is never envious of anyone, so also the Lord's devotee is never envious of anyone. The only justification for Maharaj Parikshit's behavior is that it was ordained by the Lord. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport to the 29th sloka, 18th chapter, Parikshit cursed by Brahmana boy, first canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Any comment or question concerning this verse? I believe that was sort of the theme yesterday to some degree. It was a little bit longer purport. Theme was the formality of reception in Vedic culture yesterday. But also it spoke about this grave situation of becoming angry at a sage and Brahmin for a king like Parikshit, and again concluded that it had to be the will of the Lord, it had to be ordained by the Lord. That is, Srila Prabhupada says in the last sentence, the only justification, otherwise it can't really be figured out. Like we have psychologists today who try to figure out why people do things. And, they have come up with many reasons and different types of personalities and psychological conditions which make people behave in different ways. But here, Srila Prabhupada is saying that we can't really find why somebody like Parikshit Maharaj, who is a pure devotee of the Lord and very well trained in Vaishnava culture and has the power of a Rajarshi, or a great saintly king. We can't understand what made him act like this from a material perspective, from just a psychological perspective. Physiology-wise, we may, understanding that he had become extremely hungry and thirsty, we may certainly be able, from an ordinary person's point of view, be able to understand, why he became angry and upset. But still, because Parikshit was who he was, it was expected that he could tolerate these things because he was such a powerful and great human being that, even hunger and thirst would not be able to make him behave in an inimical way toward a sage and a Brahmana sitting in meditation. So the only justification, says Srila Prabhupada, for Maharaj Parikshit's behavior is that it was ordained by the Lord. So the Lord, the devotee can see the Lord's hand in everything. The non-devotee is always trying to understand nature, and most often nowadays throws things simply up to chance. By chance it all happens. So therefore, many times it's difficult for them to be stable because chance at any time could change them up or upset them, even when less expected, some change may come, and they conclude it's only by chance. So, what a life whereby we're dependent on this thing called chance. This thing, you could call it luck. Because after all, it's only by some chance. What would be another definition of that? Just some luck, some phenomena that, nobody can understand why it happened. It's just this thing called chance that they actually claim created the universe, these atheistic people. That somehow or other the universe came about by chance. By chance, something came out of nothing. And by chance, it began to evolve. And by chance, it came to life. Now, we don't generally see things happening like that in our ordinary world. We don't see things happening by chance. Although, people certainly conclude that, an accident was by chance, they may say, or certain other things were by chance. But even though they say like that, when it goes to court, they're always looking for the person to be held responsible, who's liable for it. So, we see that there has to be some person behind things. And we can't say, they're very fond of saying that this, our human body has evolved by some sort of chance or, mutation or natural selection, that only the strong survive. And therefore, life evolved eventually into a human being. And they're still looking to see if there's any life anywhere else. I mean, they don't think that there's higher beings governing things in this world, maybe due to their arrogance, their ignorance and arrogance, thinking that they're the highest people in the universe. Even though it's obvious that we're not controlling the sun, which is extremely regular. They base a calendar upon the sun's movements. They base a calendar upon the moon's movements. It's so regular. They calculate the stars in a very regular fashion. So we see everything very regular, and yet they conclude it's by chance. They conclude the human body, how can it be by chance? Even one cell is such a phenomenon that it's impossible that such a complex organism could be by chance. And there are devotees such as Sariputta Prabhu who prove by mathematical theory that none of this could happen by chance. I don't, know his, the way he worked out these things mathematical. It's according to some theory called information theory, that, it's mathematically impossible. And there are many theists, theistic scientists and theologians that can argue and prove that it's impossible for life to have come about by chance. But somehow or other in our modern academic institutions, we continue to promote that. And there's actually a lot of complaining by many theists that there's a lot of prejudiceness against them for just asserting that life has had to come about by a superior intelligence, a superior person. It's like they want to write that off the chart, that things have come from a person. I mean, where else could things come from but from a person? We don't see anything coming from anything that's not living. Just tell me one thing that's come about from something that's not living. Things, living things procreate. Life comes out of life. It doesn't come about from nothing. But yet that's what they say, but in our observation, we can't find, they talk about the black hole that everything came out of, and they sort of indicate that, you could go look at it through the Hubble telescope or something. But in reality, all these things, they're just basing on different types of symptoms that they're perceiving through different types of waves and, information that's coming into their high-tech, machines. But it's not like anybody can walk up to it and they can say, just look through here and you'll see, the black hole that, of nothing, that everything has come out of. No, it's not like that. So they're very expert at arguing for us because basically they utilize their vast intelligence and their ability to grammatically, Prabhupada would say, grammatical gymnastics to simply do what they want with words. Because, they've been blessed with some Shakti of being very fluent and articulate and being able to manipulate language. And they have studied data that's been accumulated for hundreds of years. And they speak according to that data. And if you don't understand it, they conclude you're uneducated and less intelligent. And then if you try to speak according to the data of the Vedas or the Bible or the Koran or some other theological literature, then they just say that, that doesn't count. That's just circular arguments that life has come from a person. But, maybe it's a circular argument that life has come from nothing. They try to prove, evolution through archaeology. But when people come up with other types of finds in the archaeological stratums of the earth, then, not Sadaputa, but Michael Cremo, Drutakama Prabhu, he has proved that these things just get put on a shelf somewhere and not really presented equally in scientific journals and investigated in the same way, that things that fit within the status quo of what the academic institutions have laid down is the evolutionary theory, which they teach in all institutions, practically speaking, definitely in the Western world, and in others also, the way they perceive that evolution has come about. In some other places, like in the Near East, they put their own twist on these things. And even in American religious institutions, they put their own twist on these things. Because, they are private institutions, they can do that. But in the Ivy League schools, which started out as divinity schools, and so many other big high-class scientific schools, University of Texas runs the biggest, cancer hospital in the world, MD Anderson. You cannot speak out against evolution, especially from a should we say spiritual point of view, or from a personal point of view, that no, life has had to come about from persons, superior persons. Otherwise, how is it possible for life to have evolved? No, that's childish, they say. That's, just with people who can't understand all the big words we throw around and all the investigation we've made into the universe and into life at a very small level. If you haven't studied all of that, don't try to come here and just say it's come from a person, because that's just what any kid can understand. But you have to actually train yourself to understand this evidata. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada created the Bhaktivedanta Institute for people who have studied this evidata and understand it, and can then utilize that same data to prove that life has had to come from life. Like our Swarup Damodar Prabhu. He was a PhD in chemical science, some type of chemical science, chemical engineering or something like that. Maybe biological or biological chemistry or something like that. But he took, he was fortunate to be attracted to Srila Prabhupada, and even more fortunate to make the endeavor to become his disciple, and even more fortunate that he did become Srila Prabhupada's sannyasi disciple, and took his mission to heart and utilized his life rather than to make money or to just help in material research to make chemicals or various things to make people's material lives more comfortable in this world. He utilized it to prove that life has to come from life. And he did his best to educate other scientists in this way, and to bring other scientists together to make argument in terms of life coming from life. So, the only justification for Pritchard's behavior is that it was ordained by the Lord. So we say that. We say that the Lord is ultimately in charge. And, from a court perspective, we could give so many phenomena that people just leave to chance, that from another perspective prove that it was ordained by God. Just even yesterday's Ratha, we could say that. The wind was supposed to be blowing 20 miles an hour, and there's supposed to be thunderstorms right between 12 and 4 p.m. But somehow it wasn't. And most of it was last night. I don't know what they were saying yesterday about last night. I thought it was tapering off a little bit. And definitely the report for today was much better than it was supposed to be for yesterday. So how did it change? The best minds that we were just talking about had made their prediction only 12 hours before it was to happen. No more than 12 hours before it was to happen. A modern app, on a computer, said, calculated by these meteorologists, had concluded that the storm was supposed to happen between 12 and 4. But it didn't.
There was another kind of storm.
So the devotees conclude that Jagannath, the Lord of the universe, must have had a hand in this matter.
He was the storm.
The Lord is so great, He is so great, that even amongst insignificant human beings who are making some humble attempt to glorify Him, He can change a whole climatic condition around. Another proof of that Of course, they don't accept it because they just want to call it mythology, because they can't understand that persons can be so powerful. But when Lord Krishna lifted Govardhan Hill, we see Krishna is glorified as Natharaj. He lifted Govardhan Hill. There's no greater feat. But we never see behind the scenes the power of Balaram. What was Balaram doing? Indra was throwing torrential rain for 7 days. Drops of rain, bigger than baseballs or softballs, were coming down. Like basketball size. Just storming down. How much water is that? Why, when Krishna put the hill down? There was no water. How could people walk out? Where did it all go? So, Krishna doesn't have to do anything. When Krishna desires something, it's done. Even if he wants to wash his hand, Balaram is there. So Balaram manifested as Anantasesh and spread out all over Vrindavan, and the water just washed off somewhere else. And then by the arrangement of Krishna in his pastimes, Agastya Muni drank it. Why? Because once Mother Parvati wanted to invite the devotees for prasad, and her husband told her, no, they eat too much. It'd be very difficult. But she insisted and did it anyway. And so they all lined up. And and according to the etiquette, you serve out. You serve one person. When you get to the end of the line, that person can have as much as he wants because he was last. And at the end of the line was Agastya Muni. And he kept eating it all. They'd get to the end of the line and he'd have to take whatever was left. And so they ran out. And he was still hungry. And Mother Parvati didn't know what to do. She goes to Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva told you, I warned you. And so like Draupadi, she prays to Krishna. And Krishna comes, just like he did for Draupadi. He says, do you have anything left? Anything? And he sits at the end of the line. And so she brings him, she finds a tulsi leaf. And she brings it to him and he eats it and he's completely satisfied. Unlike Durvasa Muni and his 10,000 disciples in the Draupadi Leela, Agastya is not satisfied. And he's really bent out of shape at Krishna. Why did you sit at the end of the line? Now I have to go away. Still hungry. Because you're satisfied. And so Krishna says, well, what did you want? He says, there was still drinks. I didn't get any drinks. So he was given the blessing that he'd be able to come and drink all the water from this Govardhan Leela that Indra showers down. According to some Puranas, I just heard it from our devotee, Divya, not Divya Purusha. I can't even remember his name right now. I just call him Divya all the time, but that's not his full name. Anyway, Divya had just spent quite a few years in Vrindavan. He got upset with his brother about something and just renounced the world and went and sat down in Radhakund for many years, and eventually the devotees coasted him into coming back to New Orleans and again taking up the treasury work where he had done that for a few years. Went to India once and got upset with his brother and went off to Radhakund. Didn't come back for quite a few years. So anyway, he had heard this pastime somewhere during that time, So that's the power of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But they don't want to put anything special on it. So, let them have their academic institutions, but if these are the institutions that are funded by the state, and the state is not partial to any religion or to any other school of thought, I don't know how that's stated in our Constitution. There's definitely a separation between church and state. But then, should the state be partial to sectarian points of view, sectarian schools of thought? Because after all, the evolutionists are simply another school of thought. It's really, you can't say it's the obvious scientific fact. They try to argue that, but it's discredited by many other scientists who are not exactly religionists. So the state shouldn't be just partial to that school of thought, and that's what many Christian, they call them creationists, that's what they state, but they generally don't make much headway in the big academic America. They have their own schools and they can teach how they want it there, but when they try to do something in publicly funded schools, they generally get chased out. It ends up in court, and the judge ends up siding with the scientists against the theologians. So it's interesting. That's the way it works in our country. India is also a secular country, but it's also a very religious country, and so you have so many theologians, both Muslim and Hindu and Christian alike, who have to deal with whatever is being taught in the secular institutions. They're training the leaders of the world, both academically and economically and politically. So I'm not exactly sure what the case is there. I'm more familiar with it in America, nor do I know what it's like in Australia and many European countries, where there's definitely, in most European countries that suffered under World War I, World War II, there's not as much religious fervor as you would find here in America. And so the secular institutions or the academic institutions that are teaching evolution, may have, I'm not sure how it's established there, because Europe in many ways can be a lot more liberal than America with things. Like in Europe, I believe they're a lot more liberal with alternative medicines. In the state, there's not some big institution that, such as the American Medical Association, that fights against a lot of alternative medicines. And therefore you find a lot of medicines that are being used there that don't get as much support here in America. So I don't know what the situation is concerning this whole controversy of life coming from life or life coming from nothing. Whether they treat it more fairly in their higher academic institutions or not, I'm not sure. There's just a lot of complaining amongst American theologians, including Srila Prabhupada, that it's not treated fairly here in America. Prabhupada really spoke out against atheistic scientists, pushing their point of view on everyone. And Prabhupada wanted us to stand up and push just the opposite. So to prove that life comes from life, life comes from a person, for somebody with barely any scientific education, especially no higher scientific education, they wouldn't take me very serious, because they can just laugh you off. They can attack your character, which normally you can't do to prove your point unless the person's character doesn't meet up to what it's supposed to. And because mine wouldn't meet up on an educational level, they can do that. They don't have to listen to someone like me. But you have someone like Sariputta Prabhu, with a PhD in mathematics, then he can prove through mathematics. And they have to deal with that. Yeah, speak Prabhu.
So Prabhuji, so there was an actual court case between the creationist and the...
Oh, all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, because the religionists, they pass in some, especially in southern states, the legislators pass something whereby they're going to give equal treatment to creationism, or I forget what they call it, the intelligent design theory, as well as to evolutionary theory. And boy, immediately the academicians drag it into court, and usually the courts decide against the theologians. But the original one was the famous 1930, I think 1932 Scopes trial. It was the very first time. They wouldn't allow evolution to be taught in schools. And so there was one man, I think Mr. Scopes was his name, maybe, that was his name. He was a high school teacher in Tennessee, and he started teaching evolution. And boy, all people, really spoke out, because they were all fundamentalist Christians, and this was, of the devil, being spoken. This was something, against the Bible. And so there was a big court case, and there was a New York lawyer came down to defend Mr. Scopes without any cost on his part. Because otherwise, if he would have had to pay for it to get a court-appointed lawyer, he would have probably lost. But, this Mr., I think his name was Darrow. Darrow. He, the big New York lawyer, he came down to defend him. At the same time, a gentleman by the name of William Jennings Bryan, who had run for president 3 times, he was a very powerful orator. He was a Christian minister. Very, powerful political and religious figure in the United States at that time. He argued on behalf of the state for creationism.
He also argued against, changing our monetary system from.
Yeah, he wanted the gold standard.
He was a real. In some ways, the man was really very, very pious, and actually was fighting against Kali all the time. Unfortunately, he didn't have the benefit of what we have, Srila Prabhupada's teachings. And
so, because he argued on the Bible being taken literally, then he was, I don't want to say laughed out of court, but especially because it was a Tennessee court. So he actually won, if I'm not mistaken.
No, he got, no, in the end he was humiliated.
He was humiliated, but somehow his client,
his
client won, the state won.
The state won, yeah.
But, that was the beginning of the end. For religion being what they considered religion being taught in school, which was the biblical point of view that everything comes from God. And if you would have said anything else, you were a heretic, and you wouldn't have been just thrown out of church. But even in school, these were not Catholic schools or Protestant schools. These were public schools. You would have suffered prejudice, retaliation even in a public school for speaking out for evolution, and they would have considered that against God, and you would have been really slandered.
Even in the 50s, we were still saying the Lord's Prayer before class, and then one atheist sued the school system, and no more prayer in school.
But there were ever supporters of that who felt that the prayer was Protestant, it wasn't non-denominational, and so Jewish kids, what to speak of, at that time there wasn't Muslim kids or Hindu kids in school. There were, some Jewish kids, and then so, the Jews supported it because, their kids were always being attempted to be converted to Christianity, even in public schools.
Well, it's because of Christmas. Hanukkah just didn't cut it. We had them on that. But let's see. Yeah. Oh, so I was listening to NPR on Christmas Eve day. I was driving around doing some errands, and NPR, which is that's a publicly supported but partially government supported. So they were playing a mass from the Church of England, the King's King's Cathedral, and it's very traditional thing. It's been going on for 100 years, and they were singing all these Christian, beautiful Christian hymns, with big, beautiful choral things, and then you'd hear someone speaking about it, and I thought, this is completely across the line here. What's going on?
No, they have a little bit of a reputation of trying to present, beautiful things, whether it be religious.
Yeah, but it was promoting Christianity.
But they often, you could say, I don't think that they would consider promoting as simply presenting something
then
that's
we should
very
be able
beautiful.
to do a Gita Jayanti Day.
They do that with Indian music, or with some sort of thing about meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And they certainly, they have their curriculum is pretty expansive. The things that they present on there. They're often labeled left wing.
Yeah.
But they try to present an objective point of view, and even though some people may call it fake news, they're pretty good journalists.
They're objective.
Yeah.
No, they try to be. You know what? So one thing is, I remember Siddhartha Bhuta, because he was staying in the Atlanta Temple, and I was there, and so was Sri Damodar, and another devotee by the name of Madhava, Brahmachari. You see pictures of him with Prabhupada. He was also a mathematician, and they had this. That even though the games of chance, like say roulette or dice, craps, or any kind of gambling, there are laws that govern the games of chance. They can tell you that what percentage, like is one in say 100,000 that you have a chance to win in a roulette game. But they do say, like in something like blackjack, you have like a 13% chance of winning.
And that's why the house always wins.
Yeah.
Profit.
Yeah. But the one game that you actually have a chance, a 12 or 13% chance, is blackjack.
Anyway, Yudhisthira and also, who's that famous devotee in the Damayanti story? Was it Damayanti? It was also a Kali story. What was Neela? Wasn't her husband's name Neela? Nala, yeah. They certainly lost the chance until they learned how to become, expert gamblers themselves. Yudhisthira Maharaj and Nala. They both learned the art. Both of them. But I don't think either of them would take advantage of other people like they were taken advantage of. Because they are pious devotees, and they simply wouldn't do that to another person for material acquisition. But Nala's brother did it to him, and Yudhisthira's cousin did it to him. So anything else? Mother Mana.
I just wanted to mention that I saw this ad for an app that they were creating new people's faces. So I thought, okay, let's take a look at the app.
You won.
So what do you mean faces? Faces, computer faces?
Completely new faces. It's a new person that no ever existed. So I thought, okay, so this is interesting. I want to see. But the application is made of combination of faces that are already existed.
Yeah. Yeah, so they say
they're
it's
not doing
new.
anything new. This is not a new person. This is a combination. They will mix a pretty good variety of people. So yeah, it's a completely new person. But it's the same thing with creating life.
But they really can't say that it's never ever existed, because all they know is what has existed within their purview,
Yeah.
Even
So
cloning is not.
nothing is created from nothing.
And even cloning is just, that's not creating a new life. It's just like, they just split it. And but Prabhupada would say, this is what he would say, even if they did, let's say they actually could do it. They could actually create a body and then bring a soul to that body. Then Prabhupada said, that would be like saying, hey, I made a car. See? I mean, how many billions of cars have been made? Big deal. You made a car. You know how many billions of living entities exist? Trillions of living entities God has created? So you did one? That's, of course, they can't do that. But that was Prabhupada's, one of his arguments, said, so what? God's already created, and he created you, who you think are the creator.
Srila Prabhupada said if we can make just 10% of them devotees, then the world could become like Vaikuntha.
I think he said 2%. I'm not sure.
I heard also on NPR radio that there was there's one Japanese doctor who's prepared to transplant a head onto another body, and there was a paralytic gentleman who was going to do it in an attempt to get a working body. But somehow or other, I don't know how, but he actually had a child. And then he was afraid that if he didn't live, then, he couldn't, now he didn't want to do it because he was worried about the chance of not living. But before the child, he was prepared to have his
it's already been done.
dissected and placed on another body. And this,
the Ashwini Kumars already did it. Ashwini Kumars already did it.
Yeah, Ashwini Kumars.
Well, also Lord Shiva did it too.
Yeah. So it's not, the technology is there.
Yeah. And then, I don't know who did it for Daksha, but maybe it was Lord Shiva that did it for Daksha too, huh? Put the goat's head on his body.
I don't think it was Lord Shiva. I think it was maybe someone, but I can't remember. I know the Ashwini Kumars did it so that they could learn, put a horse's head on. Who was it? They put a horse's head on, so that he could give them knowledge, because they did. Somebody had cursed that you give them knowledge and I'll kill. And so then he said, you cut off your head, transplant a horse's head, and then you give us the knowledge. And then if he kills you, then we'll put a new head on. Something like that.
Something like
that. So many things that went on in the universe, I mean, this is like a really, Lord Chaitanya's Tam is the big thing, really. But if you take Lord Chaitanya's era out of this planet Earth, I mean, it's all so insignificant, compared to the universe. All their politics and economics can all be destroyed at any time, It's only because of Lord Chaitanya's era that there's actually some significance here. It's pretty amazing that, I mean, it's a time of spiritual evolution. I mean, it's a very vibrant time of, people being, elevated and given a chance to become free from all of their bad karmas and to head back home, back to Godhead, and to get, a much better life after this human life. Whereas, prior to Lord Chaitanya's era, there's no telling where people were going. It's become such a degraded age.
Sometimes I think, like some of these people, like say William Shakespeare, probably said he probably a Brahmin from his previous life, but even the founding fathers like Jefferson, and that some of the things that they wrote, you would think, well, why couldn't they get the chance that we've gotten? Because they seem to have more of a, more than the most common, or even the most elevated politicians today. They weren't as, they were much more, Benjamin Franklin, all of them, they all thought it was the height of arrogance to think that this is the only planet where life exists. To think that God only created life on one planet is absolute absurdity. And that's what's thought by Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, all of these, the founding fathers. And they were what you call deists. They thought there's a deity. They weren't sectarian. So why didn't they get the chance?
Well, we don't know where they took birth, so they may have been given some chance,
But
Krishna
you
is more
think
of a fan.
there are so many people that were so, apparently very, very knowledgeable and advanced, like Leonardo da Vinci. He created, actually had the drawings for helicopters and, all kinds of technology that they only just now are doing. Or just in this last 20th century.
Where you think that's coming from, though, Mayadanava, or?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, humans are being given all sorts of things.
He vanished for some time. There was a gap. He went into a cave and disappeared. Then he came back with all this information.
Interesting.
There's some story like that. He went into this cave. Several years later, came back and he was like,
That's what Mohammed did too, right?
Yeah.
And Christ,
but he
for
went
40 days. And we have our Braja Bihari also went into a cave and came back with caveology.
Cavemanology.
Yeah, well, that was
Yeah, Baba Mahatma.
Well, I only would like to say that the marathon went really smoothly, and I'm very, very surprised that for the second week I went to distribute in a Mississippi place, in a Mississippi corner of the world, which I would have never thought or expected that the books would get out.
And they got out, huh?
I was very surprised. I'm really sorry to say that I have a bad conception of the Mississippi people. I'm really sorry.
It's justified
to say that. But when I went there, every single book that I put in their hands of anybody was taken very graciously. And some girls, some young girls, they even said, "Oh, I have this book, I have it, oh, I want this for someone."
Really?
It was just amazing to see how these books were going to the right people.
Yesterday's Rath, it was amazing to see the people, eating the prasad that the devotees were distributing, so many apples and oranges and bags of dried fruits and nuts, and it was just amazing. You also saw some people who politely turned it away, maybe with a frown on their face, some of them. But the amount of people that took and enjoyed that apple and enjoyed that orange, I was just amazed at the smiles on their face, and
but
they were so
that
grateful.
is New Orleans, right? So
New Orleans is a little bit more international, right? Big city. It's amazing. We don't spend enough time in the rural areas helping people, small towns of America.
So New Orleans is known as weird, so we're not that badly situated there.
It was funny that yesterday, there's a lot of tourism, so yesterday there were a lot of Oriental people in town. I don't know if they were Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, or what, maybe a combination, Koreans, but there were a lot of Oriental people in town yesterday. And they were
probably
getting
some
mercy.
convention or something. But then weren't the Bulldogs coming in?
There may have been. I didn't see people with football paraphernalia, and I didn't see everybody.
Georgia and Ohio.
It was pretty full for Thursday.
Yeah, it's Georgia and Ohio. Those are two big. That's a big.
They both bring big
base.
fan followings. Yeah, they'll be coming. They'll be real crowded down there this weekend.
Yeah,